Let's investigate how to be an overcoming Christian by diving into the first 3 chapters of the biblical book of Revelation. The book of Revelation was written by the Apostle John on the island of Patmos. He shared his message of repentance with 7 churches in Asia Minor, or modern-day Turkey. But John's message to the church then can echo to the modern-day church and to individual Christians. So, let's journey from Rolla, Missouri to the island of Patmos in the Aegean Sea. Patmos is a 7.5-mile long island that is 37 miles off the coast of Turkey. The entire area at the time of Christ and afterward was a part of the Roman Empire. The writer was John the Apostle, the same John that was the beloved disciple of Jesus and the other half of the Sons of Thunder with his brother James, the son of Zebedee. Let's use our imagination with this version of a much younger John from the video series The Chosen. This letter to the church was written around 90 AD under the Roman Emperor Domitian. The Romans exiled John to the island of Patmos because John opposed Domitian. The Emperor Domitian sent out a decree that all his empire should worship him as the, quote, God the Lord. John and the other Christians were of course not going to go along with that decree and were persecuted. At that time there were perhaps 100,000 Christians in all the world. Christians were a small minority in the Roman Empire that had between 60 million and 80 million people. Some scholars believe Revelation was written down as early as 69 AD. Regardless, John's exile to Patmos ended when the Emperor Nerva became emperor in AD 96. John is also not alone on the island with the goats. There were military fortifications there along with temples. While on Patmos, John wasn't in chains or in a prison cell. Like Alcatraz Island, the water surrounding the island of Patmos kept John from escaping to the Asia Minor mainland and freedom. But I think getting revelations about Jesus would have kept most anyone from thinking about fleeing elsewhere. John would have preached to the locals during his time there and even baptized new Christians. Church tradition says John was accompanied by his slave and scribe Prochorus. Hope I'm saying that right. Prochorus was one of the original 7 deacons in Jerusalem, chosen to help the poor and widows after Christ's crucifixion. According to church tradition, Prochorus traveled with John to Patmos after the Virgin Mary's death and wrote down John's vision of the apocalypse and the challenge to each of the 7 churches on the Asia Minor mainland in Revelation 1 through 3. This monastery of John was built in 1088 on the highest point in the island to protect those there from the pirates of the Aegean Sea. The basement library also holds the oldest known copy of the Gospel of Mark, an illuminated manuscript from the 5th century. It also has the skull of St. Thomas the Apostle, or Doubting Thomas, encased in a silver goblet. Church frescoes on Patmos also point to John having been on the island. Church tradition also says that during the 2 years that John and Prochorus were on the island, Revelation was written in this cave, the Cave of the Apocalypse. The cave was not only a shelter, but also a spiritual retreat. John was apparently in this cave when he received his revelation. The place where John laid his head to rest and a small cavity in the rock that John used to grab onto to get up after kneeling for prayer are both preserved. The rock on the cave ceiling is also torn in 3 parts, which can be seen as symbolizing the Trinity of God. John then sees the vision of Jesus amid the 7 golden candlesticks. Quote, "What you see, write in the book, and send to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamum, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea." So, why these 7 churches? Scholars say the 7 churches represent all churches at all times. Why aren't there more letters to other churches? Well, maybe John said it all. John could have said more, but maybe everything was already said. These 7 candlesticks, representing the 7 churches, are examined to see if they should be lit or not. Jesus, through John, declares the triumphs and failings of the recipient churches and warns each congregation to repent. The locations of the churches form a geographical crown around the great metropolis of Ephesus. So, how did John get the letters to the churches? Church tradition says it was with a messenger. Regardless, after John's exile, church tradition says that John went to Ephesus, where he lived until his death and where he was buried in this tomb. About 40 years before the Apostle John arrived in Ephesus, the Apostle Paul had traveled to Ephesus in AD 52 to lay the foundation of the gospel there. We learn about this from the book of Acts. Paul would head to the synagogue and preach the gospel. The population of Ephesus during the New Testament period is estimated to have been between 250,000 people and 300,000 people. At the time, Ephesus was the fourth largest city in the Western world, behind Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch. So you can think of Ephesus like New York City would be to North America, the cultural and commercial hub. It was also the home of paganism and the occult. So in Ephesus, the accumulation of knowledge was very important, kind of like maybe Rolla, Missouri. The city had a public library and a medical school. No word on if they had a school of technology. Like maybe many people in Rolla, the Ephesians had all this knowledge, but not the joyful, overcoming relationship with Christ. Ephesus was on a coastline, and the harbor there connected the whole Roman Empire, but also connected to an important road that ran from Constantinople to Tarsus. The city housed the Temple of Artemis, otherwise known as Diana, the fertility goddess. The temple was the fourth of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The temple was 4 times the size of the Parthenon in Athens, Greece. The temple housed one of the first banks in the world. You could deposit your money and then withdraw it with interest there. The temple was also a place of pilgrimage. At that time, a pilgrim could leave the Temple of Artemis with a small terracotta reproduction. Today, like any good museum, the gift shop there sells Artemis souvenirs and statues. Paul used the Temple of Artemis as a way to street preach the gospel. Paul preached the resurrection of bodies, the stewardship and use of money, and loving your enemies, ideas which disturbed those in power. Paul's urging of those involved in witchcraft to burn their witchcraft books, worth millions of dollars today, really ticked off those in power. Paul was run out of town to Greece to continue his ministry. John's letter to the church in Ephesus begins with encouragement. I know you're doing your hard work and your perseverance. You have been in hardships for my name and have not grown weary. But then the text grows critical. Yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. So what happened to make the church lose its first love? Maybe it was their multiplication of activities that cut them off from the essential relationship with Christ, their communion with Christ, and connection to God. Jesus is wanting the Ephesian church to be the model for all the other churches in Asia Minor. Maybe the church was very active, but the church forgot why they had to be active. Maybe God was saying, if you move away from me, you will lose my blessing. Or maybe Christ is saying, what is the soul of your action? Maybe it became easier to talk about God than to talk to God. In the northern suburbs of Ephesus lies St. John's Basilica, built over the tomb of John. In the centuries after Revelation was written, the river connecting the port city of Ephesus to the sea gradually silted up, depriving the city of its access to the Aegean Sea. That and the rise of Christianity gradually impacted the city's importance, and Ephesus was eventually abandoned in the ensuing centuries.
I think there really are distinctions in reward in heaven, and they're not poisonous, and we're not going to feel envious or resentful. What this quotation from Edwards does is describe heaven with real differences between the saints, among the saints, because of real differences in holiness here, and yet a community of love in which those differences not only do not produce envy and regret, but actually function to produce the greatest happiness for the community as a whole. Get ready. This sounds really different than anything you've ever heard, I predict. Christ tells us that he who gives a cup of cold water to a disciple in the name of a disciple shall in no wise lose his reward. But this could not be true if a person should have no greater reward for doing many good works than if he did but few. It will be no dampening to the happiness of those who have lower degrees of happiness and glory, that there are others advanced in glory above them. For all shall be perfectly happy. Everyone shall be perfectly satisfied. Every vessel that is cast into the ocean of happiness is full. And there shall be no such thing as envy in heaven, but perfect love shall reign through the whole society. Those who are not so high in glory as others will not envy those that are higher, but they will have so great and strong and pure a love to them that they will rejoice in their superior happiness. Those that are most happy will also be most holy, and all will be perfectly holy and perfectly happy. But yet there will be different degrees of both holiness and happiness according to the measure of each one's capacity. And therefore, those that are lowest in glory will have the greatest love to those that are highest in happiness, because they will see most of the image of God in them. And having the greatest love to them, they will rejoice to see them the most happy and the highest in glory. Those that are highest in glory, as they will be most lovely, so they will be fullest of love. As they will excel in happiness, they will proportionally excel in divine benevolence and love to others, and will have more love to God and to the saints than those that are lower in holiness. Those that will excel in glory will also excel in humility. The exaltation of some in heaven above the rest will be so far from diminishing the perfect happiness and joy of the rest who are inferior, that they will be the happier for it. Such will be the union of their society that they will be partakers of each other's happiness. Then will be fulfilled in its perfection that which is declared in 1 Corinthians 12:22. If one of the members be honored, all the members rejoice with it.